Greetings and welcome back to Get Your Shift Together speaker series, Energy Management for the F Generation, the frustrated, fatigued, and freaked out freedom seekers. I'm Martha O'Regan, your host. I'm an embodiment coach for the awakened shift head, supporting those who are tired of trying to think their way to health, happiness, and success, and take all the tools that they've learned and integrate and embody to truly create the life of their dreams. We're so happy to have you all back again today, and we have a great speaker who you're going to really love listening to. We have Alexander Mallon. Welcome, Alexander.
Hi, Martha. Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to go ahead and read his bio, ask the question, and we'll just take this interview and move along. So astrologer and intuitive Alexander Mallon has practiced for more than 40 years, sharing his gifts with clientele spanning the globe from New York to New Zealand. Discovering his calling early in life at age 15, Alexander began to work professionally with private clients, including doctors, lawyers, and corporate leaders. He has been featured on numerous radio and television programs, and for 5 years had his own call-in TV program, New Planet, which aired in Manhattan and in the San Francisco Bay Area. Known for his compassionate style and also his direct laser-like insight, Alexander provides consultations and life coaching services for individuals, couples, and corporations. An avid amateur astronomer and sky observer for almost 50 years, Alexander also conducts classes and experientials in astronomy and sky lore at his home observatory in the Hudson Valley of New York. Alexander earned a certificate of astrology study from the Astrological Research Center of New York and holds a degree in art therapy from Long Island University, C.W. Post School of Visual and Performing Arts. He has also received training in body-centered Gestalt therapy at the Hartford Family Institute of Hartford, Connecticut. That is quite a bio, Alexander. Welcome.
Wow, it's a mouthful, as I say. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and ask you the question and share with our listeners, if you don't mind, a moment or time or experience when your shift hit the fan, when you knew if you did not get your shift together, you would not experience a life of joy, vitality, and abundance the way the books and the gurus say is our birthright.
Well, as we chatted a little bit before the program today, and as my bio does state, it really did happen around age 15. Those early years for so many of us, certainly myself included, were challenging years, challenging times. Who am I? Where am I going? What career will I pursue? How do I connect in the world and fit in the world and interweave in the world with friends and family? And what is this family? And what are these friends? And what is this world that I'm stepping into? And how do I do it? And of course, the typical, not rare angst of a teenager. That was really the what led me to my profession. It was particularly as an avid amateur astronomer and backyard telescope builder, and as an amateur ornithologist, bird watcher. Really, nature study was my thing since age 8 or 9. And my parents and friends and family, of course, presumed I was going to be an ornithologist, particularly, and or some kind of a scientist, a hard science person. I had built a nature museum in my basement at age 9 and 10, and I learned how to build a microscope from books in the library at age 10 and a half. And one of my favorite stories is when I was 4.5 years old, I wanted 2 things. I wanted a trampoline, which I never got, and I wanted a telescope, which we couldn't possibly afford. And so around the age of 11 or 12, I got some books out after the microscope on how to build a telescope. And, the rest is history. I've built a goodly number of telescopes all my life. But those early years when I had no money, I built 2 or 3 or 4 telescopes. That launched, besides the nature study and the bird watching and studying herpetology, reptiles and amphibians and all the aspects of nature, that got me into that astronomy that I loved when I was 4 years old, at night sky. Like all astronomers who hear about this word astrology, this astrology column next to the funnies in the newspaper, all astronomers are just boilingly frustrated with the whole idea of it. And so I would speak vociferously against astrology also. I would just like slam it whenever I could. I thought, well, God forbid, I'm somewhere public and I'm doing my spewing about astrology, and someone knows more than I do. Well, I better start to study astrology a little bit so I can, argue more intelligently and show people the irrational, the ridiculousness of this astrology business. And within 2.5 weeks, I said, wait a second. There's something to this. There's one coincidence after another as I'm studying, and these coincidences are becoming predictable coincidences. So hold on now. I need to study more. So after 2.5 months of study, I realized this is what God and Goddess put me here to do. This is what Great Spirit put me here to do. This takes my passion for the hard sciences, my passion for the night sky, my passion for humanistic studies and psychology and psychotherapy and the nature of self, and it incorporates all of that into this system, this astrological wheel, this astrological system that describes our journey through life. So after 2.5 months, I began to practice. So yeah, literally at 15 and a half, I began to work with clients who were in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and I've been doing that for 4 decades. So it's been definitely a shocking and surprising turn of events for me. I think at the time it was more shocking for my parents, but so that was my aha moment. Like, wait a second, what I was taught in school, that this is the world. There's more to creation, more to spirit than just that.
I love how you can tie it all together, and not feel so, separated. I love that you, as an astronomer, you just chose, and I love how you said, I just wanted to be able to prove them wrong and tell them this is crazy and, validate what I believe, and wait a minute, maybe not so much. So I love how you were open enough and felt that nudge enough to check it out and to learn more and to bring it all together. So just for the simplicity of it and understanding, what is the difference between astronomy and astrology when we hear those words? Just a brief, just difference.
Well, astronomy, of course, as a hard science, as a body, and astronomy and cosmology are hard sciences that study the nature and phenomenon of the visible and not always visible universe, the measurable, visible phenomenon and experience of the universe around us, particularly the night sky and the cosmological sky, and how creation, let's say the Big Bang, how creation was formed. So that's the hard science. It's strictly about what's measurable and observable as sciences and repeatable. Astrology is really parascience. In other words, there's a scientific element to it, strictly and only in that the way a chart is created is drawn directly from astronomical observation. A birth chart for a person or a country, what have you, an event. A chart is literally a pictograph of the sky. It's just exactly literally a pictograph of the sky, of the local horizon line and the visible sky above. That's what a chart is. And as such, that astrological chart describes that person or individual, or if you will, the coincidence, the imprinting of the environment on the birth of an individual. So astrology is really kind of a blend of mythos and environment, of observational science with human experience, to give ourselves a sense of where we are in the phenomenal world. So, where we are as individuals in consciousness in the phenomenal world, astrology, what the phenomenal observable world is, measurable, astronomy and hard science. They're two very different things in some ways, but astrology really is much more of a crossover than people would know. And certainly astrology is a radical crossover, way beyond what astronomers know. All these decades, I go to astronomy conferences 2-3 times a year, and I can assure you that I've never met an astronomer yet who has any real knowledge of what astrology is about at all. They have the same concepts that I had as a young man, but they haven't done any kind of inquiry to learn about it. So astrology and astronomy are, in fact, sort of sister disciplines, and obviously for many thousands of years, certainly They say astrology has existed for 5,000 years. We know that there were astrological charts drawn back in Egypt. And so astrology, at least in a very quantifiable way, has existed for 5,000 years. And astronomy and astrology was the proto-science. So astrology was the container for astronomy. Astrology was the container for mathematics. Astrology was the container for human sciences. I mean, all astrology was the container for medical science. And still today, there are branches of astrology that address all those things. So it's really an amazing tool, an amazing art form, astrology.
Thank you for that. I know that that's something that if people are just now kind of diving into the whole idea, that we hear those words and sometimes maybe think they're interchangeable, but you clearly are not. So you used the word imprint. Could you share a little bit more about what that means when we're imprinted? Use that word.
Well, so the aha moment, that shift moment for me at 15, where I was clearly headed to the hard sciences as a profession. Although my background as a painter and artist also was happening. So, I thought medical illustration, or where would I go with the hard sciences and the arts? That shift happened for me when I became aware that astrology, the coincidence, this mirror, astrology is sometimes referred to as a cosmic mirror, that the individual's birth chart mirrors two fundamental things. So what makes astrology? I used to say, well, what makes astrology something I should, what is it and why is it? And why do we even look at it as some kind of mirror for us? Well, the birth day that you have describes the season that you're born into, a particular subseason, early spring, mid-spring, late spring, early summer, midsummer, late summer, etc. So those signs of the zodiac are shorthand, really. They're kind of quick and dirty shorthand for this particular part of the subseason, this particular part of the growing season, and or the harvest season, or the following of harvest season. Where we are born, how we are part and parcel born into an environment that imprints us. It imprints us even in utero, before you're born, at age 7 months, 8 months, 9 months. If mom is giving birth to a child in the middle of winter, even for mom and the infant, there is a hormonal bath. There is a biochemical bath that I think, strongly suspect science has yet to really grasp, that infant is experiencing, that throughout the first and second and third trimesters of pregnancy, the environment, the biochemics of the environment, the foodstuffs, the food that a mother would take in, all the environment is part and parcel of who we are. That in modern day sciences, that is modern day air conditioned environments, modern day, incandescent or LED lit environment, we've kind of really lost the connection to the natural world. But as we see with any kind of major environmental or weather phenomenon, a hurricane or what have you, Mother Nature rules, that we're just mammals, we're just, individual animals that are subject to this beautiful phenomenal world around us. And astrology mirrors that. So it mirrors what part of the subseason, what part of the growing psychosocial season are you imprinted by, and what part of the daily rhythm are you imprinted by. In other words, a summertime baby is imprinted in one particular way, generally an extrovert, and a wintertime baby is imprinted in a different way, generally an introvert. And a noontime baby is, again, imprinted by extroverted social environment, and a midnight baby is imprinted by a very quiescent, quiet social environment. And those two things, where are you in the diurnal daily rhythm, imprinted by that as at birth, and where are you imprinted by the societal social environment, the season? Those two things, the time of day and the season, are what a birth chart's all about. And it mirrors how you're connected to the great spirit, to the spirit all around you.
That's great. And I have been in one of Alexander's workshops, and it was absolutely fascinating. So I will just put a side note, if you ever find yourself in the area where Alexander is doing a workshop, you will want to be there. he first introduced he gave us our charts, and the first thing you look at is, oh my gosh, what does this mean? You know, and he broke it down in a way for us to be able to understand it and to really glean more about ourselves than we ever, you know, even really knew. But it kind of validated some things that we knew about our personalities and about our quirks and about why we respond and react a certain way. It was really quite fascinating. And so I know that Alexander, and we're going to prepare to do this, Alexander has a couple of charts that he'd like to show and love to show you guys so that you can kind of get an idea of what that looks like. Is this a good time to do that, Alexander?
Let's do that.
Great. Well, stand by.
So Martha, first before I show astrological charts, I just wanted to show the folks at home my observatory and my medium-sized telescope. You know, so this actually is a 14-inch diameter observatory-grade telescope. Most universities have this scope, and it's a little 3-inch diameter finder scope. And here, this young guy's trying to get the sun, the image of the sun in his eyeball there. So a 2-inch lens, you know, telescopes, and what we remember as children, many of us are a little bit older, you know, the eyepiece and the telescope used to be this little tiny pea shooter thing. Well, you know, I like to, as an astrologer, astronomer, I like to literally see and sort of bring down those planets, bring down those god goddesses, if you will, the mythic, you know, god goddesses that the planets are named for. I like to literally see the environment, you know, as a nature watcher and a bird watcher and a backyard astronomer. I like to really ground it and see with my own eyeball, you know, what I'm looking at as an astrologer in these charts. So I wanted to just share, you know, a large scope does some incredible things and shows you incredible views that, boy, over these decades since I was age 11 building telescopes, if I could just share with the audience some of the incredible views I've had, first eyeball, it really gives you a sense of your perspective in the world. And, you know, for the average individual, if they ever had a chance to go to the local university or an astronomy club, there are astronomy clubs all over the nation. You can go on your local internet and get a view of Saturn with your own eyeball. It's a mind-blowing thing to see in real time. I had one young guy say, "No way, you must have a picture of Saturn in there." I said, "No, I pointed to the star. I said, there's Saturn in the sky, and here it is in the eyepiece. This is why I do this, you know." And he says, "Well, what's the connection?" To show you that, you know, the universe is vast, that we are just a wonderful grain of sand on this beautiful beach and ocean of creation. So I like to really, you know, I like to really earth it and bring it down to earth. And so now on the screen, doing a screen share here, I'm showing you a picture of the United States of America. This is the US chart. And I'll give you a sense what this chart is. So a chart is obviously a circular form. It's a circular map. It's a literal visual map of the sky at any given time from a given location. This chart for the United States, of course, is July 4th, 1776. And there are a couple of different times used for the birth of the United States. One is that the Constitution was signed at 5:10 p.m. in Philadelphia. So this chart would be an exact replication of what the sky looked like from Philadelphia, July 4th, 1776, at 5:10 p.m. This horizontal line that divides the chart in half is the literal earth you're born onto. And since I was raised in Long Island, I used to say to my students on Long Island, if we took the chart of the moment down to the ocean on Long Island, so you're looking south over the ocean, the plane of the ocean ahead of you, that flat horizontal line, would be exactly likened to the flat horizontal line that divides this chart in half. So the upper half of the wheel, when you look at a birth chart, is the visible sky. From the left-hand side of the chart, being the eastern sky, the sun would rise, let's say at sunrise, on the left-hand side of the horizon line. As the morning progresses, the sun would arc toward the top of the sky at noon and be overhead. And as the day progresses, the sun would arc toward the western horizon and set. Since the U.S. was born at 5 o'clock, 5:10 p.m., here's the sun depicted in the birth chart. These glyphs or symbols are exactly what astronomers also use. that astrologers use. In other words, the no-brainer symbol or glyph is for the moon. That's a crescent moon shape. That looks like the moon. That's what that moon would be. In other words, this chart says that when the U.S. was born, when the Constitution was signed, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun was heading toward that western horizon, going to set about an hour and a half, 2 hours later. And a couple of hours later, the moon would be rising. So this birth chart, this pictograph says this is the visible sky from eastern horizon to western horizon. So the sun rises in the east, it climbs to the south at noon hour, gets as high as it can at noon, and then it sets in the west at roughly 6 or 7 p.m. Here's the sun in this birth chart. If we could have eclipsed the sun at that moment that the U.S. Constitution was signed, the birth of this U.S., I would have, if I was born back in 1776 and alive as an astrologer, astronomer, if someone had said, well, Alexander, wow, we're eclipsing the sun artificially so we can see the brighter stars. Well, holy cow, what's that red planet, that red star near the horizon line, Mars? What's that white star just next to it? The planet Venus. What's that yellowish star just above the white star? The planet Jupiter. A telescope would have confirmed exactly what I'm saying. You'd literally see them, Jupiter and Venus and Mars, in that order compared to the sun. Also just above the sun, yellowish orangey Mercury, and at the top of the sky, Saturn and Neptune. We'd take a telescope to see Neptune, but naked eye, you'd see Saturn high overhead. So that's the chart of the US. These days, people might be interested to know the chart of our two candidates for this presidential election. So here's a chart of Hillary Rodham Clinton. We don't have a confirmed time of birth for her. There are a couple of ideas of it being 8 in the morning roughly, or 10 in the morning roughly, a report of her being born at 8 p.m. instead. So here's the sun in this chart at 8 o'clock in the morning, if that's the right time for her. We know she's a Scorpio sun sign. We know her moon sign's a sign of Pisces. We know that that sun sign Scorpio is 2 degrees, so it's almost born in Libra. She's born in the cusp of Libra. So the energy and the mythos around the sign of Libra and the mythos around the sign of Scorpio apply to her sun, her light of day, her light of consciousness. Her ego consciousness is Libra, Scorpio both. Libra is about cooperation and harmony seeking. Scorpio is about, in some ways, the opposite, being very private and intense and driven and directive. Her emotional nature is seen as Pisces, but the moon is moving toward the sign of Aries. Pisces is about being feeling and loving and kind and tender and emotional. Aries is about being aggressive, assertive. Now, these signs of the zodiac get their meanings because they coincide with seasons. In other words, the season of Scorpio, when Hillary was born, the season of Scorpio Libra is about October into November. She's born October 26th. And that season deals with having gone back to school, gone back to work during Virgo and Libra time, September, October, and now preparing for winter, now preparing for the hardships of winter. So this is a personality that is coming out of a social time, in fact, a beautiful social time of October, September, October, and the fall leaves and the beauty of fall in the Northern Hemisphere, and moving into winter, preparedness for winter. So she's all about social connection, the Libra side of her, because she's born on the cusp of Scorpio, Libra, but she's a Scorpio technically, and this is about saying that she's imprinted by Scorpio time, when animals and creatures that can't survive the winter begin to die off. So it's the element of death and rebirth and preparation for the winter. She's all about preparation for the winter. She's all about being prepared for what might ensue. That's the thrust of her ego nature. That's very different from, let's say, Donald Trump, who's a Gemini, born June 14th. So Gemini, June 14th, April showers bring May flowers, and after May, we're getting ready for summertime, and June is that transition time when in school systems we are being tested. That's the time of exams and examinations and wrapping up work and getting work wrapped up so that summertime that's going to be shortly upon us in July and August is all organized. So June, Gemini time, the mind, an air sign about mental acuity. Donald Trump is raised and imprinted during a time of the year when his father, particularly his father and mother, were very focused on mental acuity. The whole social scene of June is mental sharpness. Exams, examinations, testing, again, wrapping up work because the summer will be upon us any moment now. And that's what he was raised and imprinted by as an infant. Interestingly, remember I talked about the chart being visible above this horizontal line? So what was rising? What was rising from his inner world to meet and greet the outer world? What's his rising sign? In his case, Leo. And what's the planet that's rising? Right in that horizon line in the east that talks about his identity, his the connection between his mythic inner world meeting and greeting the outer visible world. That's the rising sign for everybody in their personal chart. The planet that he rises with from moment to meet and greet is Mars, the god of war. That's a significant indicator in his chart. You know, Hillary's chart, well, she rises with Venus, the goddess of love, Mercury, mercurial mental, and Jove, Jupiter. She also rises with the sun, her ego. So that's kind of a blend of planets that says there's a jovial quality, a Venusian quality, a mercurial quality, and a very ego-strong quality to Hillary. That's how she rises. You know, a very strong ego, presence that can be lovable, likable, but can also be very Scorpio, very pointedly exacting to the detail and function around things. What's overhead in the social sector, the career sector for Hillary, is Mars, Pluto, Saturn. Saturn of structure, Pluto, plutonium, think of the atomic bomb, Mars, the god of war. The triplicity says she's driven in the sign of Leo. She's driven to be a leader. She's a powerful, assertive, aggressive leader. This is this chart says this is the imprinting she had regarding her father figure. Her father figure would have been very dominant in the family, and a strong father figure would have been strongly imprinting her essence. Her mommy moon figure is down at the bottom in the area of home and nest, but dad, sun, and Saturn in a birth chart. Dad symbolized here as being very outer world. And we know Hillary's early childhood was that she was born to a very right-wing, very Christian family. And then in fact, early in her right-wing political leanings herself, she actually supported Barry Goldwater before she studied or got involved with human rights and civil rights and the civil rights work of the day in the 60s. So Hillary's earliest leanings and roots in her family are Republican to a high degree. You know, if we go back to the image before I pause for you, when we look at the United States of America, July 4th, it says the United States is a Cancer nation. And what is that time period? Well, July is when creatures are born, when babies and creatures and infants are born. It's all about the family and nesting and birthing, the birth of a nation. And it says that the country of the United States, born July 4th of 1776, is all about nurturing and family, that we're one big melting pot of nurturing family. It's all about joining our family. That's the ideal of the U.S. Come join our family. That's what we're about. So birth charts describe the social season that you're a part of, the social season that's imprinted in your nature. And I'll hit the screen share, stop screen share, and come back to a picture.
Wow. Okay. So that was a lot of information, Alexander, but yet you brought such a language that I think really kind of opened up some ahas for people, and I would imagine some curiosity as far as where they fit in these charts, and that you brought in two prominent people who we are obviously forefront of our lives right now, and really kind of nailed some of their personalities, and it's fascinating, the vocabulary and you just of course just exude it and look at it like we read English, right? So love how you brought all that together. So people could actually get their chart as well, like that.
Yes, part of my offering, through you, Martha, and through your work here today is that if people want to email me with their own personal data, I'd be happy to do a computer-generated chart and email it back to them, so they have a copy of their chart to study. These days, all we have to do is go online with Google, and we can input, our query or our question. So if a person were to be born a Scorpio like Hillary Clinton, they could do a Google search or a Yahoo search, astrology, not astronomy, astrology, Scorpio sun sign. What does that mean? Or if they get their personal birth chart, we saw with Hillary's chart, her moon sign was Pisces Aries. So we would do, Google search or web search, astrology, moon in Pisces or moon in Aries, where, so each planet in your chart shows a different element of your character structure, from your ego's nature, your sun sign, to your emotional nature, your moon sign, your father imprinting the sun sign. In other words, what was daddy's consciousness when this baby was born? That's your sun sign. And what was mommy's consciousness when this baby was born? That's mirrored in your personal birth chart by your moon sign. It tells us where they were in their own development and how their adult development imprints us as infants. That's what a birth chart does. So by all means, people could email me, and I'd be happy to send out a copy of their chart.
So when you work with folks, you indicated, corporate people, doctors, whatever. When you work with someone using their chart, you're bringing it to their current day circumstances. Like maybe they are trying to plan something, or try to make a decision, or just trying to figure out, why do I do what I do? Is that kind of how you work with folks?
It depends on the client. I mean, obviously, if I work with a corporate individual, someone who's running a corporation, or usually a smaller corporation, but I've got, over the decades, a number of corporate figures. In those cases, I might help them work with employees or staff or seconds in command, or people that are integral in their corporation and company and how it operates. That corporation itself, that company also has an LLC, a birth chart of itself. So we could also look at that company and how that company is likely to fare financially in the marketplace. That would be one kind of work, and that's not my typical kind of work. But what I more typically do with individuals is really use their chart as sort of a tool for spiritual, psychological self-awareness. In other words, I think a birth chart's greatest gift to us. The ancients derived this incredible system to mirror who we are in our environment. And I think it's really intended, specifically and especially, to help mirror who we are, why we are who we are, how we were genetically made and genetically imprinted, how we were emotionally, psychologically imprinted in our early childhood development, what was happening in our family, what's happening with our mother, our father, our family of origin. How does our family of origin develop gifts and talents handed down through family lineage? And also, how does our family of origin bring to us, maybe sometimes perpetuate, family lineage challenges, areas of needing growth and awareness and awakening? So ultimately, a birth chart really has as its greatest gift. And what I do specifically and especially in my practice is work with clients to use their chart as a mirror to help them see their greatest gifts and greatest talents, but also areas of impasse or challenge, where they are getting in their own way, how it's interwoven with their family. In other words, a birth chart doesn't say, this is who you are just as a soul and a spirit. It says, this is who you are as a soul and a spirit, and how you've been born to this family system that is accentuating certain specific gifts and talents and certain specific lessons. And it helps me, like a roadmap. It helps me read this roadmap to get a sense of, where are your lessons? Where are your challenges? How are you getting in your own way or impeding your spiritual progress? That's really what it comes down to. How can we raise our consciousness, become more self-aware? And how does the chart act as a roadmap to help us get there? So the really cool thing about the computer era now, this time when we have internet and email, is that when clients work with me, I usually do a screen share or a Zoom session or a Skype session with clients if I'm not able to sit down with them in person. and I teach them their chart. I teach them what the basics of astrology are, like I've done just today with you folks. And then hopefully they'll go on the internet and take this chart and read about themselves, learn about themselves. So an astrology chart is an incredibly complex mirror that literally tells us the family we're born into, what mom and dad's consciousness was at that time in those early years, and how it's imprinted us. And so we get to see through in a very objective chart form our greatest gifts, our greatest talents, and also areas that we, again, get in our own way. And I think that's the greatest use of it as an art form.
And I know you have, this has piqued a lot of interest in folks, just curiosity now to see their chart and to understand a little bit more of it. You've given us just enough nuggets to pique our curiosity. I know it did when we did the workshop, and it's a life, I'm sure once you receive it, it's a lifetime learning. I mean, it's not like something you get and you go, okay, cool, and you put it aside. It's something you can go back to and acknowledge and contemplate and discern why I do what I do, and maybe if I do something, it's very validating. And I think what you've opened up for people is enormous. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just lastly say that yes, a birth chart is a blueprint of that foundational self. But the moment that snapshot of that picture of the sky is taken, and the sky, of course, is always shifting. The sun is always moving through the sky and so forth. So that is implying that there are a lot of other charts astrologers use to mirror how we've developed, how we've grown, how we've matured, not only our yearly growth, but our day-to-day, week to week, hour to hour. I mean, you can really see quite exactingly the potential of growth, the potential of awakening. The actual awakening, that's the journey of the self. That's the journey of the individual. A chart doesn't make us what we are. It mirrors us. And it really mirrors us in terms of our growth. It mirrors us in terms of our greatest potentials as well.
I love the cosmic mirror. That's a really beautiful way of saying it. I love that. So we're going to be wrapping up soon. And as you all heard earlier, Alexander said if you will send him an email, he will send you a birth chart. He'll ask you for the details. His email will be on his profile page, so you should be able to access it really easily. And we just are so grateful for you being here today, Alexander, and sharing with us your gifts.
Thank you so much, dear Martha. It's always lovely to see you and be with you, and thank you for your time.
And again, if you find yourself, go to his website. If you find that he's showing up in your community, take advantage of his workshop. You will be so blessed that you did. Thank you all for joining us today for another episode of Get Your Shift Together speaker series. And we look forward to having you back for the next time. And remember, these are going to be available for replay. So if your friends and family have not signed up yet, and you just know there's somebody out there that could benefit from this information, it's not too late to sign up, because all of them will be replayed. So don't forget, just go to www.getyourshifttogetherseries.com and they can sign up. Thanks again for being here. We're all in this shift together. Live awake, have fun.